We've all heard horror stories of tattoos gone wrong, but in today's age of regulations and sanitation advancements and guidelines, these have become increasingly rare. In fact, I would say that in general, tattoos are very safe to get. Of course, if you're not in a controlled situation, like say a friend's cousin's basement that's underground or prison, your risk greatly increases. A tattoo, after all, is an open wound, and that is just an invitation for the little nasties to get in, even if you are getting your tattoo at a shop, as is the case for this poor unfortunate gal in Vancouver who, after a new tattoo, found herself hospitalized within a few days and out thousands of dollars. Now, this is a story I stumbled upon on Twitter. It was posted sometime last Friday and within 24 hours generated almost 10 million views. I screenshotted the entire thread because I was in the middle of training, but when I looked at this post after, I was flabbergasted. It is truly an unfortunate tale, but also a cautionary one, littered with red flags, and we're going to go over the whole story so that this does not happen to you. Let's start with the opener, and it's a doozy. So this woman says, "I think enough time has passed and I'm ready to talk about my janky ass tattoo, since the guy who did it ghosted me and I'm upset." So what we know currently is that she got a bad tattoo, and now her artist has gone silent like the hill. Let's find out more. So she says, "So my beloved artist that's done 90% of my other beautiful tattoos moved away. So it felt like fate that I met a new tattoo artist at work one day, just as I was looking to get this piece. He worked out of a private studio, aka a room in an old building downtown, so I was nervous. But he told me countless times that he'd been doing this a long time and in multiple cities. I trusted him. Needless to say, I trusted him too much." The thing is, this person who's getting tattooed isn't some unmarked novice. She's gotten plenty of tattoos before and without issue. And this tattooer, who she had just met by happenstance, seems to be a pretty experienced artist. He's got a following in the thousands, he's got his own studio, albeit in a dingy location, but seems confident in his skills. Now, so far, nothing is necessarily a red flag, but there are definitely better ways to find a new artist than a serendipitous encounter in the wilds. And no matter how much an artist tells me they've worked, I will always want to look at their past work. Which brings me to tip number 1 to help you in avoiding your next tattoo flop. Tip number 1, always look at an artist's portfolio. The best way to measure not only your artist's skill, but also experience is to see the results of their work. You want to see how they completed the outlines and shading to get a good idea of how they will complete yours. Of course, even with some due diligence, you could still end up with something that you don't like. So let's read more into this story to identify some red flags and ways you can avoid them. So this woman, we'll call her Sick Tattoo Girl, proclaims, "My old artist would make me sign a waiver, spend a good 10 minutes cleaning and prepping, etc., while this guy did none of that." Yeah, these things are all very standard at a shop. Cleaning and prep are some of the most important to make sure that you have a sanitized work area. Waivers, I think, legally are necessary. To be honest, I've had some great artists, world-renowned artists, not ask me to sign any waiver. Probably about half of my tattoos I haven't signed any waiver for. But it's also like once you've been inked enough, the tattoo artist kind of gives you like, okay, you know, like, hey, you've been around these parks before, you know how to navigate them, so we're gonna skip the waiver. But I think in most cases you do have to sign a waiver, definitely. But let's continue, because this is when things start to get really unhinged. Sick Tattoo Girl explains, "He made me stand on the tattoo bed with dirty shoes while he hand drew the tattoo with a used Sharpie. Didn't wrap any of his equipment, used tap water to dilute his ink, used his phone without changing gloves, left me for 30 minutes mid-session to get food, was coughing, etc." Okay, so many red flags here. Dirty shoes on the bed that you're going to be lying on? Really? Use Sharpie, so you know something that's been on someone else's skin, who knows what else it's been on, is now being used as the base for where your new wound will be. And not wrapping equipment is insane. It, along with the bed and I guess the Sharpie for this guy, is the only thing that is reused for every client, making the tattoo machine arguably one of the greatest points of contamination. I have never in my life been tattooed by an artist who has not had a thick BBL width hunk of tape wrapped around their machine. Tap water is crazy, I think. I mean, I drink that shit daily, but I also don't think it's completely devoid of bacteria. And to use a phone that has gone everywhere is probably the dirtiest thing we all carry around us, and then not change gloves is terrifying. He then leaves for half an hour to get food, which I wouldn't say is a no-no. I've had tattoo artists take a break every couple hours to go smoke, but they always wash their hands after, which I don't think this guy did. Now this little blurb of a tweet is where the proverbial alarms in my head would have rang. where 1,000 tiny Jordan peels would pop out and yell in unison to get out. Sick Tattoo Girl does not do this, but you can't really blame her. She had most of her work done by one other artist who seems to have done everything perfectly, and so when you transition to a new artist and don't know how most tattoo artists work, you could just chalk it up to each person having like a different method or something. And to be even more frank, it really is the artist who's in the position of power here, and the one who should take responsibility for doing the right sanitary things, like just being clean. I feel like if you're a tattoo artist, being clean is like, you gotta, you know? And me, as a desperately non-confrontational person, can totally see myself just sitting through and bearing the whole thing, not saying a word, because I hate confrontation. After all, not all of my tattoos have been done in the most pristine condition. When I got tattooed by Apple Wang Ad, she used clean needles for each new person, but would dip those needles into the same ink well. Like this one little coconut shell full of black ink made from charcoal, she'd put other people's needles in there and just, continue with the tat. But I didn't say anything, and luckily ended up okay. I mean, I don't know if it was okay. I came back from a year-long trip, had a blood test, and the doctors said they maybe found Hep B in my blood. I don't know, but I digress. This is tip number 2. If your artist is doing something that goes against everything sanitary, then get out. Let's continue the story. Half of these things I didn't even realize were wrong until I was talking to doctors and other artists afterwards. I was just telling myself that he was experienced, and hey, people tattoo themselves at home, so this is probably fine. I was wrong. So wrong. Like I said, it's not really her fault. I mean, she could have done more research, maybe gone to a better artist, but also, this wasn't a cheap tattoo. It cost over $1,000, and that's not even counting the cost of healthcare she needed after. But we'll get there in a bit. Tip number 3 is probably have health insurance, just in case things go sideways. I don't know how the healthcare system works, but have insurance so that you can get cured and not die. Anyways, let's see what happens to Sick Tattoo Girl. She says, the next day I couldn't even walk. The swelling was so bad that I took off the wrap and washed it, but it looked bad. Bad. Okay, here's the thing. I've had tattoos that look disgusting the next day. When I got this panther knee tattoo, it swelled up to twice its size the day after. I couldn't bend it or put any weight on it, but that's kind of just part of the healing. This, however, is where the similarities in mine and her story ends. She continues. Then the worst muscle spasm started. I got a fever, was throwing up, and still couldn't put any weight on my leg. I texted the artist and sent him these photos. The redness in the photos could be expected in any tattoo, but I do notice a problem spot that seems to be developing on the thigh. Now, I'm no doctor, but that little scab area there seems like it's close to or already become infected. So Sick Tattoo Girl messages her artist to see what's up, and had she taken his advice, there's a chance she'd be without a leg, or worse. She explains, despite me saying I was throwing up, he told me it wasn't bad, and to just let it do its thing naturally. So I did, until I woke up the next morning and had no choice but to call urgent care. I got put on 2 antibiotics and said it was definitely infected. Now at this point, she uploads some more pictures to document the growing infection, and it has definitely grown. I can't show them here, and to be honest with you, you don't want to see them because they're fucking gross. And the situation has now become nightmarish. How? Well, the antibiotics didn't work. She says, I gave the tattoo artist an update, but he said it was probably a reaction to the second skin. Huh? Doctors said it was infected. So infected that 2 days later, I ended up in the ER as the infection was getting worse despite antibiotics. I was then on 4 antibiotics total. Luckily, didn't go fully septic, but if I had followed his advice, I most definitely would have. The healing process from here on left a 2mm hole on my shin and was the most excruciating and horrifying experience. So here is tip number 4 for you today. Do not go to your tattoo artist for medical advice. Yes, they may know what's happening, but they could also be wrong. And if something bad is happening, they can't prescribe you medication, so go to a frickin' doctor, man. Thankfully, Sick Tattoo Girl made a full recovery. Unfortunately, she became Healthy Tattoo Girl with a bad tattoo, because at the end of all this craziness, all this medical brouhaha, she is now left with the aftermath of simply shoddy work. We fast forward a month later, and she says, 1 month later, and while I should be happy that the tattoo is almost healed, I am so embarrassed. The tattoo as a whole looks like absolute shit. Ugh, shit. Not just because of the infection, but simply because he did a terrible job. It's full of blowouts, the shading is terrible, etc. And if you just look at these sample pictures, first of all, it's a month later and it's still not fully healed. And secondly, those lines are just not good. The lines look like they're drawn by an alcoholic going through withdrawals. And this is the point where you're probably thinking, oh, I know what tip number 5 is going to be, don't go to a cheap artist. Well, you're wrong, because tip number 5 is to subscribe to this channel because I don't post often and I would like to, and you subscribing will help that a lot. So, if you like this video, if you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe. In actuality, Healthy Tattoo Girl with a bad tattoo paid a pretty hefty price for this piece of shit. She details. With tip, I paid $1,250 for this. I almost missed days of work, had to pay for antibiotics, and fuck, I don't know if I ever want another tattoo. With $1,800 in losses as a broke student, I reached out asking for partial money back from the tattoo. I laid all of this out, his negligence, and how ultimately I just hate the tattoo. Just because an artist is cheap does not mean that they are bad. For context, my knee tattoo cost $300 and it was done perfectly. Tip number 5 is, just because it costs more doesn't mean it's better. And this one you can apply to life as well. It's a 2-for-1 tipper for you today. Now, let's put the nail in the coffin to see what the tattoo artist did in response. So Healthy Tattoo Girl with a bad tattoo that cost a lot emails said tattoo artist asking for a partial refund, detailing his negligence in the situation and ultimately her distaste of this new tattoo. He responds with one email, uno, saying that he'll offer a free touch-up as compensation. I'm mortified. He responded to one email, saying he'll offer me free touch-ups as compensation as if I'd ever trust him again. And I told him that simply ain't enough. From there on, radio silence. So let me get this straight. After Healthy Tattoo Girl with a bad tattoo that cost a lot almost had life-changing repercussions from this tattoo session, the artist brazenly offers another one thinking that it will fix it all because that's how you negate a problem, right? I am just astounded. To brighten the mood a little, she's already had countless artists reach out offering to fix this tattoo for free. I feel bad for Healthy Tattoo Girl, but hopefully after this video, we can all learn from her mistakes, become aware of an artist's negligence, and learn to say no whenever we're in uncomfortable situations. That's it for this video. Make sure you do your research when you get a new tattoo, and I will see you next time someone gets a bad tattoo. Have a blessed day.